mode.
Hello everyone and welcome to the webcast. My name is Christine Dursey. I'm the Executive Director of APA Ohio and Vice Chair of the New Urbanism Division. Today, Friday, August 22nd, we will hear the presentation, Youth Engagement and Community Leaders. For technical help during today's webcast, type your questions in the chat box found in the webcast toolbar to the right of your screen or call the 1-800 number shown. For content questions related to the presentation, type those in the questions box also located in the webinar toolbar to the right of your screen. We will answer those at the end of the presentation during the Q&A. On your screen is a list of the sponsoring chapters and divisions. I'd like to thank all of those participating sponsors for making these webcasts possible. Today's webcast is sponsored by the Private Practice Division. To learn more about our chapters, visit planning.org/chapters. To learn about our divisions, planning.org/divisions. On your screen is a list of our upcoming webcasts for September. To register for these webcasts, visit utah-apa.org/webcasts. You'll note that 2 of them are law and ethics approved. To log your CM credits for attending today's webcast, visit planning.org/CM, go to your dashboard, Activities by Provider, select the Private Practice Division, the title of today's session, or you can simply select the event number. This webcast has been approved for 1.5 CM credits for live viewing only. Some recorded webcasts are available for distance education. For availability of distance education, check the webcast webpage at utah-apa.org/webcast. And like us on Facebook, Planning Webcast Series, to receive up-to-date information on our upcoming sessions. We are recording today's webcast, and it will be available on our YouTube channel. Just search Planning Webcast on YouTube. A PDF of the PowerPoint and handouts will be available at ohioplanning.org/webcast presentations. I'd now like to turn it over to Ramona Malahi. She is the Executive Director at the Center for Better Communities and past Chair of the Private Practice Division. She would like to speak briefly on the Division's initiatives. Ramona, I'm transferring to you.
Okay, and don't forget, Christine, we're going to also do a little poll.
Let me do that right now before we even get started. I wrote it down and completely skipped over it. All right, we're going to just do 2 quick polls just so that our speakers can sort of gauge what our audience is. The first poll question, it looks like my polls didn't go through.
You want me to start then?
Yeah, well, why don't you, I don't know why the polls aren't working right now. Why don't you go ahead and go through your few slides and I'll figure out what's going on.
Okay, good morning everybody. Aloha from Hawaii. I would like to welcome you. Oh my goodness. It's not showing, not clicking. Have we changed presenters? Are we on?
No. Okay. Oh, you're good. Okay.
Great. I want to welcome you for the Private Practice Division. As you know, the Private Practice Division is one of over 20 divisions, and this year we're celebrating our 25th anniversary. And also, we have developed a member-only benefit, which is the Private Planning Practice Handbook. And it's especially useful for people who are entertaining going into the private practice and need some help. So I think we all know as planners that involving as many of the constituencies in the community is very important for us, especially in terms of the planning process and decision making. But I think Frances Moore Lepay really summarized best in terms of an informed citizenry and in terms of youth involvement. When she talked about how important democracy is and young people participation, not only to be able to help make those decisions, but to learn about what it's like to be involved in public life. And the most important thing, of course, as we have discovered as planners and involved in the community, about the good life and how rewarding that is in regards to our involvement. Today we are going to highlight the art of youth engagement with some outstanding programs. Let me introduce our speakers today. Grace Trimble, who's the Manager of Marketing and Communications for the Atlanta Regional Commission, which covers 10-county metro area, is the overall messaging guru for the Atlanta Regional Commission. And she's going to talk about a youth leadership program that they have that covers 10 to 11th graders, and they look at regional issues in the Atlanta area. Grace will be followed by Carol Myers-Flout, and she is currently the Integrated Water Management Planner for the Nebraska Department of Natural Resources. But what she's going to share with us is about a middle school summer day camp program that she was involved with when she was in Atlanta with the Gwinnett Environmental and Heritage Center. And last but never least, our last speaker is going to be Sharon Gibson. She has over 15 years experience in program development addressing poverty, community capacity building, cultural competence, and diversity. And she's with the University of Georgia. And she's going to talk to us about an outreach to at-risk youth program that they have that has been extremely successful, involving young people in terms of people of lower incomes and getting them excited about just participating in community. So I don't know whether we have the poll yet, but if we don't have the poll, let me turn to Grace Trimble, our speaker.
We have our first poll ready. And
perfect, thank you.
Sure. The first poll is whether or not you're currently involved in any type of youth engagement program. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that. So if you could just select yes or no, just so that we could sort of gauge. I'll leave that open for a moment. Okay, we still have some answers coming in. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and then share the results. So it looks like the majority of folks, 80%, no, they're not currently involved in any youth engagement programs, and 20% is yes. So great. Let me see if I can grab our other poll. It's acting a little finicky today. Let's see here. Yes, it looks like I have my other poll, so let me go ahead and grab that one. This next one is just your work demographic. I'm going to go ahead and launch that just so our speakers can see who we're working with. So we have, if you're with the public sector, private, academic, nonprofit, or other. So I went ahead and opened that, so we'll see who we have on today. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close that poll and then share the results. The majority, it looks like, is with the public sector, 63%, and 26% private, 4% academic, 4% nonprofit, and 3% other. So I'm going to go ahead and close this poll out. And Ramona, if you want to change your slide over to Grace.
I think I did.
Okay.
I think you did. I think you did too. I'm Grace Trimble, as Ramona said, Manager of Communications and Marketing with the Atlanta Regional Commission. And I'm delighted to be able to talk about the Model Atlanta Regional Commission, or MARC, which is our youth leadership program. I wasn't altogether surprised that so many of you are not engaged in youth leadership issues. I believe MARC is the first regional youth leadership program in the country, and we date back about 17 years. For those of you who are not familiar with the Atlanta Regional
Hey, Grace,
Commission,
I'm sorry, I have to interrupt. We don't see your slides. Could you make sure that you select the pop-up to show your screen?
Okay. Oops. Well, let's see. Show my screen. There we are. Is that better?
Beautiful. All right. Thank you.
Sorry, I told you couldn't make it idiot-proof. Anyway, the Atlanta Regional Commission is now they're not advancing. While we are officially a nonprofit, we act very much as a council of governments. We represent 10 counties in the metro Atlanta area. A map of those 10 counties is on your screen. But we do a whole lot more than just act as the council of government. We are the metropolitan planning organization for the greater Atlanta area, representing about 18 or more counties. We do water planning for 15 counties. We do workforce development for 7 counties. So it's sometimes very complicated to know who we are and exactly what we do. We are the first publicly funded regional planning agency in the country, dating back. Our predecessor agency got its start in 1947 with just the city of Atlanta, Fulton County, and DeKalb County. But there are about 12 regional commissions in the state of Georgia, and we are the oldest, and because most of the population of the state of Georgia is in Metro Atlanta, we are the largest. ARC over the years has been involved in some really groundbreaking initiatives. We planned for the first parallel runway system in the country, which contributed to Atlanta's emergence as the world's busiest airport. In the 50s, we began planning for a rapid rail system and had our plan ready when the then Urban Mass Transit Administration put out a call for projects, and we were able to take advantage of that funding very early on. Our Chattahoochee Corridor Plan, which dates from '73, has helped protect drinking water supplies in the region. So our primary focus has been to help the region remain competitive, and we continue that today. Leadership development is one of our key values, and we have 3 leadership programs. Our LINK trip, which stands for Leadership, Involvement, Networking, and Knowledge, takes established leaders on city visits. We've been doing that for about 15 years. We've been to Denver a couple of times, Seattle, Portland. This past year we went to Philadelphia. This coming year we'll be going to Toronto, and we talk with peers in those cities to see what their challenges are, how they're working on issues that are similar to ours here. We also have a regional Leadership Institute, which brings together about 55 emerging leaders to learn about regional issues, and we immerse them for a week at the beach, which is not unpleasant, to talk about regional issues and regional collaboration. These individuals over the years have gone on to become elected officials, citizen members of citizen planning members, and they lead other partner organizations such as the Regional Business Coalition, the Metro Atlanta Chamber, the Council for Quality Growth, and the Clean Air Campaign, just to mention a few. The program I'm really here to talk most about is the Model Atlanta Regional Commission. This program involves about 50 10th and 11th graders each year. As I mentioned, we began this about 17 years ago, and we have these students for 6 months, one Saturday a month for 6 months, and we hope to really tell them how or engage them, not tell them, but engage them in how the region works. The program is very experiential and hands-on, and we hope they come away understanding the complexity of how a region works, how critical it is for local governments to work together and with state partners to create the kind of quality of life that we want in the region. As I say, we recruit from all over the region, and this program is about 17 years old. Our goal when we started it, as it remains today, is to engage youth in regional issues. We don't believe that they're going to go out and become planners, although several of them have. Several of them are in planning schools. Several of them have decided they want to pursue planning as a career after they've been through the program. But what we hope they'll do is that after they finish college, that they will return to Metro Atlanta and get involved and at least understand what's involved in protecting our water supply, providing for transportation solutions, and participate in the public process. You know, all too often teenagers think only of what's going on in their school or their immediate neighborhood, and we believe that MARC will give them a broader view of the region's assets and what's happening to help the region address its challenge. We start in September, as I mentioned, right after Labor Day, and go through the end of February. During October, we take them on a field trip. We take them on an overnight retreat to a nearby conference center where they really have a chance to get to know each other. We begin recruiting for students in the middle of February, so we have already accepted the class that will begin the 19th of September or the 20th of September. And we make a real effort to get students from all 10 counties in the region. That is one of our core values, is that the class represent the entire region. The students have told us that one of the things they value most about the program is getting the opportunity to meet students from all across the region, from north to south. As I'm sure most of you know, Atlanta is a big region, and many of these students make friendships during the MARC program that they keep through college and beyond. The application process is relatively simple. We ask them about their extracurricular activities. We want to know a little bit about their academic record, although that is not the primary driver of whether they're accepted or not. The thing we look most closely at is an essay that we ask them to write that answers the questions: what regional issues interest you the most and why, and what strengths and experiences can you contribute to helping solve regional challenges. We give the most points for outstanding essays. We send materials to the schools every year, focusing primarily on counselors and social studies teachers and government teachers. We have found that they are most receptive and most interested. although we have had teachers recommend students who are artists or in fine arts or physics or whatever, band directors. So any teacher can recommend, and in fact, if a teacher has once recommended a student, we continue to reach out to those teachers after the, in subsequent years to see if they'll recommend additional students. Our board helps us recruit. They have been particularly helpful in getting information to the school superintendents who have been successful in getting it to the right people within the schools. And we recruit among former MARC students. So it's a real aggressive push to get the class assembled. We receive about 100 applications each year, and then a committee of ARC and staff, local government staff, and former MARC students comprise the selection committee. As I mentioned, our priorities, our top priority is to ensure that we have students from each of the 10 counties in our region, and it's essential that we do that. So even if we do not get participation from all of our counties by the deadline, we will extend the deadline and do an additional push in those jurisdictions. A lot of people have asked us how we pay for this. We are very fortunate in that ARC does have some resources to contribute toward it. We operated on a fairly small budget. The staff time, excluding staff time, it costs us about $20,000 a year to do this, and that includes all of the printing that is necessary for the materials and the mailings, but it also includes breakfast and lunch each time we meet, the cost of the overnight retreat, and just out-of-pocket expenses, office supplies, and that sort of thing. Given that everybody's budget is tight, we have been able to raise some corporate funding over the years. We've gotten funds from AT&T, from Wells Fargo, and then the Captain Planet Foundation has also given us a grant several years ago. So it is a fairly cost-effective program. The curriculum varies from year to year. We do that because we evaluate every class, every session. We have the students, we ask them what they liked, what they didn't like, and we are always tweaking the curriculum to ensure that it's engaging and fun. These young people are asked to give up a Saturday, and we don't want to bore them. So we really do try to give them a lot of very, very rich experience. But we always include a land use exercise. We have units on transportation and water. It's very difficult to get teenagers to think about growing old, but as the Area Agency on Aging, we think it's important that they understand that when you are planning for a region, you have to plan for all of the citizens in that region. And like most places across the country, the number of older adults who are going to be living here is growing exponentially. So we talk about aging and the challenges that means to the physical environment and resources, and then we also talk about the region's economy and jobs and how jobs are created. The land use exercise is one of their things they enjoy the most. We give them a demographic profile of a town and a base map, and they have to plan out where they would put their schools, their roadways, their parks. Some of the land is set aside because either it's wetlands or the slopes are too steep, but they have to put all these facilities, including a landfill and water treatment, on their maps. What they don't know when they are planning we divide them up into groups. What they don't know is that after each group has planned its town, we put those 6 boards together to form a region. And invariably somebody has put a landfill right next to a park, and they get a little mini lesson in the importance of cross-jurisdictional planning and collaboration. Water supply is a big deal in Metro Atlanta. We've had protracted droughts, and we've had lots of litigation that has created challenges for us. We've worked hard over the last decade to try to manage our water resources well, and we hope that these young people who come through our program become good stewards and advocates for good water policy and good water planning. So we have them test the water in the Chattahoochee, which is the primary drinking supply, and we talk to them about where the water comes from and what some of the challenges are in terms of stormwater pollution and conservation. The built environment takes a lot of our attention. This image shows PEDS, which is a pedestrian advocacy group, taking the students on a walking tour of an area of Midtown to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly in terms of the pedestrian environment. They always get a lot out of that. And 4 years ago, when we did our regional referendum to raise money for transportation, a referendum that did not pass, much to our disappointment. But one of our interns, who's there in the red checked shirt, developed a game called Terminus, which was designed to sort of mimic this regional referendum. And they divide up into 5 groups, 5 jurisdictions, and they have to invest in transportation projects to meet individual community goals, but there's not enough money, so they have to negotiate with their neighbors to see which projects they are going to fund. That game, actually, Johan, who's there in the red check shirt, presented this to the Transportation Research Board several years ago. Many of our students are from the outlying jurisdictions, and some of them have never ridden the MARTA rail system before, so we always like to try to get them on the MARTA rail. There's a lot of misconception about MARTA, and almost all of them are transit advocates, and we think that's a good sign for the future. And they always are thinking of ways to improve transportation in the region. We've done housing exercises where we ask them to think about the combined cost of housing and transportation, and show them the link between those two, that if you live too far away, you have to have more vehicles than if you live close to work. We've been to the nanotechnology at Georgia Center at Georgia Tech to learn about the economy, and it's just, again, it's a very, very rich program where they have lots of hands-on activities, lots of problems to solve, and we even occasionally do some, we almost always do some kind of leadership development unit within each session. Each year during the class, students divide up into 4 committees that mirror ARC's committees, and each committee researches and develops proposals for making the region a better place to live. They have their own thoughts about, as you can see on this, homelessness was of concern to this group, and they research these issues and come back with proposals for how to address the things that are of interest to them. The committees focus on community services, communications and public involvement, transportation, and environment and land use. And each meeting, they have about an hour to meet, to debate, to discuss what they want to do, and then between meetings, they do their research and their planning. the final meeting, they come together to present their resolutions to their group, and then the whole class votes on those resolutions, and those that pass go on to the ARC board, where the students have a chance to present to the elected officials of the region. And then usually the chairman refers those resolutions to ARC committees for considerations. One of the things that is the goal of the program is to expose these youth to the elected officials. And we've had students who have gotten internships with local governments. We've had students who've been invited to follow local officials around, shadow them for a week or for a day. So they really do get a chance to meet some of the top leaders in the region, and we hope that pays off for them. We as I said, we do talk a little bit about leadership and mentoring and what they need to do to be a good mentee, and how they can go about developing a mentor relationship with an older adult. So we want this program to extend beyond the 6 months that we have them. It's a great program. It's been very successful. The board over the years has become more and more supportive of it, which is why the funding remains in place. We have much more opportunities for them to engage today than we did before. The students get invited to come and participate at ARC committees. One year we even had students go and present to the Georgia Department of Transportation board. So it's a lot of very exciting opportunities for these young people. They keep in touch with us. We now have one of our graduates is a member of the Atlanta Board of Education. He won an election this year. We have students who have raised funds to preserve rainforests in South America. We have a lot of students go on to tech, and we hope they'll come back as planners and architects and engineers and provide their services to the region. We are currently working on creating an alumni group, and we have 2 former MARC students who are involved in that. So we'll see how that works out. It's been a great experience for me to run this program for 13, 14 years, and we're very pleased with it, and are willing to share information with anybody who is interested in starting a similar program. We can help you figure out where we made mistakes, what we learned, and what we can, we'll give you any and all of our materials. So I think that concludes. I'll be happy to take any questions at the end of the session. So thank you for your attention. Carol?
Okay. With that, I'd like to shift gears a little bit and talk about, as Ramona said, my name is Carol Cloudy, and I'll be talking about a summer day camp that I put together several years ago with the goal of introducing middle school students to design-related careers. The camp was called Designing Our World. I'm going to start out by giving some background and overview of the camp, just an introduction to what the camp involved and who was involved in creating it. And then I'm going to move on to some lessons that we learned from the camp that I think would be applicable to anyone listening who might be considering some sort of career-related outreach to children, especially in this middle school age bracket. Okay, so Designing Our World is a one-week day camp. It was targeted at middle school children, so approximately ages 11 to 13. The primary focus is on introducing them to careers in architecture and landscape architecture. So far, the camp has taken place 3 times for a total of a little over 40 campers have gone through the program so far. Designing Our World grew out of a partnership between the Gwinnett Environmental and Heritage Center, which is in Buford, Georgia, which is in Metro Atlanta, and the University of Georgia's College of Environment and Design. As with any partnership, these 2 organizations came in with kind of different goals for the camp, and part of the challenge was getting those goals to work together. For the Environmental Center, they were really interested in this camp as an opportunity to highlight sustainable building techniques. The center is a LEED Gold facility, and they consider it part of their educational mission to teach the public about green building. And so this camp really fit in nicely with that. For the university, they mostly saw this camp as an opportunity to increase awareness of landscape architecture as a possible career path. As many people listening are probably aware, like planning, landscape architecture is a field that most students have never heard of by the time they get to college. And so they saw this as a way to introduce potential students who might be interested earlier. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about details of activities, particularly as this is an landscape architecture camp, and this is a planning webinar. But I did want to give an overview of just some of the types of activities that we included. Focusing on the architecture and landscape architecture sections, we tried to kind of give a well-rounded overview of the career. So we focused on careers in those fields, as well as people who either currently or in the past have been involved in that career. We also included things, tools related to those careers, and then moved on to applications. So what are some kinds of things that people in those careers could potentially choose to do with the skills that they developed? Planning was a little bit different. It was, since it wasn't a primary focus of the camp, there were obviously fewer planning activities. And also, we weren't so focused on giving a complete overview of planning so much as pulling in details about planning that we could relate back to architecture and landscape architecture. So we took the opportunities to talk about planning as we could, but it's not as broad of an overview as the other 2 topics. Okay, with that, I'd like to move on to lessons learned, some tips for sharing information about your career with middle school students. The first tip is to look outside of planning specific events for opportunities to share planning with others. In most cases, you're not going to have, city planning day, or you're not going to advertise a planning event and have lots of people come show up. So think about events that are going on in your own community that are related to planning in some way that might like your perspective on what they do. In this case, we were looking at landscape architecture primarily, but also to a lesser extent planning, and thinking both of these are things that middle school students probably haven't heard of and are not necessarily likely to sign up for a camp for. But by bundling those together with an architecture camp, architecture is something that most middle school students have heard of. Many of them are very excited about it, think it's kind of a glamorous field, and might be interested in it as a career. So we brought them in, bundling it with architecture, and that gave us the opportunity to also talk about landscape architecture, and like I said, to a lesser extent, planning. What you see in front of you is an overview of the base outline of the camp. As you can see, for each of the 2 major topics, architecture and landscape architecture, we started out with a day focused on basic skills and concepts. So what does an architect do, or a landscape architect, and what are tools they use to do that? And then moved on to applications and broader picture activities within those fields. The second thing you'll notice is the organization of the camp started from a small spatial scale down to the individual room for architecture, and moved out to buildings and then landscapes. What this did was give us the opportunity to tie in planning as a natural outflow, tie in a couple of hours of planning on Friday as a natural conclusion to help wrap up those other topics. Second tip, if possible, include some real-world examples from your own community in your outreach. Examples from across the world are great. There's a lot to be learned from that. But I recommend thinking about what it is in your own community that can help you illustrate the points that you're trying to make. And the reason for that is, first of all, if you're talking about a building or a park or something that the children already know about. It's something they can be excited about and bring their own experiences into the discussion. But second of all, if it's something they've never noticed before, maybe they'll notice it again after your activity, after you've talked to them, and it's something that can serve as a reminder to them over the years as they pass that when you're driving down the street or playing in the park or whatever. And it might be something they can share with their family or friends when they're there. In this example, these pictures are from our field trip to downtown Beaufort. The primary focus of this field trip was on looking at a variety of architectural styles. This is really something spectacular about the community of Beaufort, is that there's a huge diversity of architectural styles, really good examples of a lot of architectural styles. And the reason for that is it's a small town, but for over 100 years it was dominated by a very successful industry, a leatherworking company. And so that provided over 100 years of great specimens of various architectural styles. In addition, while this was an architectural focused field trip, this ties back to the first point about using whatever opportunities you can to talk about planning. By being in Beaufort, we were able to talk about adaptive use of historic structures. We were able to compare the core of downtown with the nearby residential area. And we were able to talk about how the railroad and the factories shaped the form of the town, the city layout. Tip number 3, partner with an existing youth education or outreach organization. In this case, the university provided subject matter expertise for the camp. They provided a staff member who was responsibility for the coordination and activity development, as well as visiting professionals. Every year we would bring in at least one architect and at least one landscape architect for the children to interact with. The landscape architects were always professors from the university. In contrast, the Environmental Center provided a facility for the camp, existing marketing materials, name recognition as a summer camp destination so that parents would feel comfortable with the idea of sending their kids there, and experience with children. They provided staff members who could give feedback on whether activities were age appropriate, as well as be there to deal with potential behavioral issues that pop up. It may not be an environmental education center that you find to work with, but I do recommend looking at scout troops or career day at your child's school or church youth groups or whatever it is in your community that already has children coming together, and see how you can build into their framework so that what you can focus on is what you know and love, and you can have somebody else who can help you with the logistics of running an activity like this. Next, build on existing resources. Look for existing activity ideas and find out what's worked well for others. In the case of Designing Our World, we relied heavily in the initial planning stages on Boy Scout and Girl Scout badges related to architecture, landscape architecture, and environmental design. Now these badge requirements didn't write the camp for us, but what they did do is provide us with a foundation that was based on what 2 internationally recognized youth organizations felt were age appropriate and felt was a good, well-rounded introduction to these careers. So it provided a starting point. Similarly, identify existing experts, volunteers, and sources of information in your area. Again, don't start from scratch. In our case, every year we brought in a master gardener to help talk about plant selection. That's something we could have done ourselves, but we felt that it was a better, more informative for the children and also easier for us to bring in master gardeners who are an existing volunteer organization that exists to come talk about plants. Similarly, for the field trip, we didn't start by going to the library and researching the history of Beaufort. We started with the Beaufort Historical Society and asked them for suggestions and looked at what resources they already had that we could tie into our field trip. Number 5, focus on key points, not details. I think suitable program goals, especially for the middle school age, would be to introduce a career option, provide an overview of key concepts and ideas, spark interest and enthusiasm, and build a foundation so that if those children later decide to go into planning or a related career because of what they learned, they've got something to build on. And they've had time to think about what they might like to do in that field. And if they choose not to go into those careers, it's a foundation so that they understand what role those careers play in their community. Notice what's not on this list is making sure that they do everything exactly right, that they produce a product that is actually useful, or that they use the tools in exactly the right way. Those are important for college, for your office, things like that. But when your primary goal is to spark enthusiasm and introduce the field to them, really focus on the process rather than the product. Speaking of that process, I recommend including active learning opportunities whenever possible. These could include field trips, crafts, demonstrations, sensory experiences, anything like that. The picture shown in this example was an activity that I really enjoyed from one of our guests. This was Scott Weinberg. At the time, he was a landscape architecture professor. He's now retired, but when he came and spoke to the kids, he's someone who uses AutoCAD a lot in his plans and his designs, and he wanted to share with them a park plan that he had been involved in. Now what he could have done is stood up at the front, showed some maps that he had created, showed some pictures of the final outcome, and been done with it. But what he chose to do instead was basically bring an AutoCAD activity to the students on a piece of paper. So he printed out the site layout, all of the buildings, swimming pools, ball fields, everything that was included in the program of what was needed for that site, explained to them some background about the site, and then allowed them time to try to think where they would like to put all of those things in their own park. Only after they had glued down all of their buildings and ball fields did he go back and show them building by building and ball field by ball field where he put everything in the plan and why. And so that really helped the kids engage a lot more with the process, helped them understand what it was that he did as a landscape architect, and then gave them some feedback in terms of comparing their output with what a professional actually did. So I loved that activity, and I thought it was a great model to follow. Tip number 7, balance creativity and content. This activity that you see in this picture was probably the highlight of the week for most of the campers, and this was building a model treehouse. We had the luxury of an entire week, so we every year dedicated about 5 or 6 hours of time to this project. Obviously, if you've got a shorter term, an hour or two, then you need a smaller project. But we initially started this model treehouse activity. We thought to do it very, technical as a learning activity, where we provided drawings and had them build a model to scale. And then we backed off this idea and thought that it was really important to give the kids an opportunity to experience design for themselves and just have some time to explore. And what ended up happening that I wasn't expecting the first year was that each camper went through the process in a very different way, focused on the part of design that they were most interested in. So for example, some of them focused very heavily on interior decorating. This particular tree house shown on the left is a very, very simple tree house. It's just a platform, and all the rest of that camper's time was spent with decorations. On the other hand, we had some students who focused very hard on engineering challenges. This one doesn't look like much in the picture, but it was very, very technically difficult, and it was a rewarding challenge for that camper to try to figure out how to attach his construction to this tree. And still other campers, as the week went on, it became very obvious that their focus was on the experience of moving through and interacting with the treehouse and making sure that everything that was needed to do what they would want to do with a treehouse was present. And so that was just really neat to give the campers time to explore, to be inspired, and to try to figure out who they were as a designer. Finally, don't underestimate what kids can do or understand. I know middle school can be a very intimidating age for a lot of people. Middle school kids they're not really little kids anymore, but they're not grown-ups either, and it's, you don't know what to expect. So I wanted to leave you with some feedback that we've gotten from some of the guest speakers that have come over the years. The first one, what I did walk away from that was the unbelievable enthusiasm of the students. They were all engaged and asked many good questions. They also did not hesitate to give their own opinions about some of the things we talked about. Second, I was amazed that the students so quickly picked up on concepts that it takes several lectures for older learners to understand. By the end of the work sessions, they were speaking design and charting their careers to include design professions. Talk about fast learners. And just so you know, in this context, older learners means college students. This was a professor, and so was comparing these middle school students to his college students. These were really representative of the feedback we got from all of the guest speakers. And this is very similar to my own experiences the first time I did this camp. Middle school students are amazing at how fast they can learn and how many complex ideas they can understand. Planning and related fields can have some very complicated topics, and it can be really tempting to try to, baby those down so that kids can understand. But at least at this age, go ahead and talk to them, at a complex level of detail. And they're not going to understand everything, but I think they'll get a lot more out of it than they would if you just assumed that they couldn't understand. And with that, I'll just leave you with some contact information on our website so you could learn more about the organizations that were involved in developing this camp. And I will turn it over to Sharon.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself before starting. Hello. As Ramona has said, I'm Sharon Gibson. I was with the University of Georgia as of August the 1st. I retired from the University of Georgia and am now working independently on contracts, currently with Cornell in Wisconsin, University of Wisconsin. Georgia Teens as Planners is a program project that was funded through USDA, and it was a 5-year project. We began our project in 2009. Funding ceased in 2014, but the project itself is still ongoing. Teens as Planners was a response to concerns that high school principals had across the state and some of our conversations with them about kids who are non-joiners. These are kids who don't join, they're not involved with athletics, they're not involved with any after-school programs, 4-H, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, Boys and Girls Club. But, and we know as youth development professionals that youth that are engaged, that are involved in youth development projects are less likely to drop out of school. They tend to graduate on time. They feel more connected with their communities. They have more confidence in themselves and actually will have a vision for their future. We also know that males who drop out of school are several times more likely to become involved with the criminal justice system. Our Teens as Planners program was based on a program that I was involved with Dr. Pratt Cassidy, also with the University of Georgia and the College of Environment and Design. I am a cultural anthropologist by training, and working with Dr. Cassidy, who is a planner and teaches in the College of Environment and Design. We were working on a program called Your Town, and I looked at Your Town, which is an adult program, and was trying to figure out how do we take the concepts of planning and use that as a tool to engage youth around issues of civic involvement and citizenship. So when I began the project, I started looking at the various research that's out there about youth involvement, especially for high-risk adolescents. Our program actually took place in 2 very rural counties, in Madison County and Elbert County. The counties have some differences, but the overall similarity had to do with the high number of teens that were dropping out of school, and also a large number of teens who are not involved actively in any type of youth programming. One of the key things that we've learned in working with youth, vulnerable youth, is that it's critical to build trust, not just trust between you and the youth you're working with, but these kids also have to learn to trust each other. Trust and also to trust their schools, their community, that their people are going to follow through with what they say they're going to do. The strategy that we developed was to to help the teens build competencies that they could apply whether they get an after-school job or they go on to college or they go into apprenticeships. But we wanted to just begin to build competencies. What we base our program on is something that is a youth development model that focuses on generosity, belonging, independence, interdependence, and mastery. So we were looking at building competencies and connections with their communities. We wanted the teens to be able to demonstrate those competencies through identifying and addressing community issues. The youth were asked to look at their communities and their neighborhoods, their county, and come up with a list of things that they felt needed to be fixed, needed to be addressed in one way or another. Now remember that this program is a 5-year program. We pick them up and identify them in 8th grade. They come into the program in 9th grade, and we stay with them all the way through graduation. So we have a long period of time to work with the youth. The third strategy was that the youth will be able to identify and utilize community resources and systems and information, one, to help them in their future lives, but also in addressing those community issues that they think are critical. Our fourth strategy was that community partners would begin to recognize and value that what teens can bring to the community change process. One of the things that has come out of this program, out of Teens as Planners, is that not just the attitude of the youth that were involved, but also the attitude of the adults that were working with them and community members that were on the periphery that were just observing what was going on over these 5 years. A good example is this young man here. This young man had to we had to help him become independent because he had to be emancipated at an early age because of his family situation. And one of the things that he brought to the group was being able to talk about to his peers about the importance of not just constantly taking. He always was saying, it's about giving, You take some, but you're going to give a lot. The outcomes of the TAP program, TAP became what the kids called it, so it became the acronym for the program. TAP participants have had opportunities to learn those needed skills and to master those skills into addressing the issues that concern them. TAP participants had opportunities to regularly speak to decision makers. They recognized early on, these teens recognized early on through the various types of trainings that they went through, that if you have an idea, you can't just go out and do it, that there is a process, and that they have to engage with local government, engage with the decision makers if they want to bring about change in their community. Another outcome that we felt was very telling about the Teens as Planners program is that the TAP participants began to be able to talk about their roles in their community, and they had a sense that they were actually contributing. They were satisfied with the roles that they were playing in their community and their families, and they take it beyond just that family and community and school to state and national issues that you'll learn about later on. TAP participants also could define themselves as change agents in their communities and change agents in their schools and even in their families. Remember that these kids came from very high poverty communities, high poverty families, and there were numerous risk factors that they were dealing with. these teens also felt that they were positively affecting the quality of life in their community, not just for themselves, but for their whole community. And they felt that their community saw them in a different light, which answered several of the of our strategies that we were working from. When our Teens as Planners when we first started the program, we were looking to identify a core group of teens from each of those counties. We were saying that we would have 20 teens that we would follow for those 5 years. This was a very comprehensive and intensive program. There were not a lot of teens that participated in it, but because of the time period they were involved in, we were able to see greater outcomes because there was much more time spent working with each of the teams in the program. When they first were identified, we had pretty much an even number of males and females. But as we went forward, we saw that this program really turned out to be a very strong program for working with high-risk adolescent males. One of the things that we, because most of the leaders in the program were females, we realized quickly that we needed to reach out to men in the community and bring them in because most of these males did not have an active male role model in their life. So the way the program started, it was in the first year of participation. A lot of time was spent on developing trust and teamwork, developing basic life skills. I mean, we're talking that the kids had to basically, they had to learn to cook for themselves, to clean for themselves, to take care of their personal needs, because we thought we were going to jump directly into community projects, but we realized very quickly after engaging these youth that there were a lot of personal needs that had to be taken care of before we could move forward. So they developed a lot of basic life skills, leadership skills. We spent a lot of time on understanding governance. About halfway through the first year, one of the things that we did was we asked the teens what was missing. If they were going to add something to the program, what was it that they needed us to bring to it? And what surprised us was that almost to the student, to the adolescent, each adolescent said the same thing. We're failing academically. We need help. So what we did was we engaged youth, college students at the university level in various departments, in the math department, in English, and we assigned students to those to various TAMP members to help them with their academic skills. Because we knew if we didn't deal with the academic pieces of it, they weren't going to do well in school, therefore they were not going to be able to stay in our program and participate in the planning portions of it where they were actually becoming engaged and learning about how their community worked. In the first and second year, we built in a lot of incentives to try to keep the kids in the program. We found quickly that those incentives were not as necessary as we thought they would be. You know, small trips, little items like T-shirts and things to try to keep them coming back. But we found that once they developed that sense of belonging, that sense of ownership of the program, they didn't need incentives to stay in place, to stay involved with the program. Some of the early outcomes that we had through this program was that local decision makers see the TAP participants as real partners in their community. They access the youth to find out what they think needs to be happening in their community, and they actually engage the youth on boards, on community teams to make for planning and for decision making. It's not just asking a kid to be there because we need to have a teen on the board. Local stakeholders actively seek seek out the TAP participants in the TAP program for assistance in addressing various community issues and projects. The TAP teams understand the importance of collaboration, and they're good at working together with each other and with adults in the community. The other piece that we felt was very important, that the teens needed to learn the language of governance and the language of planning. The language as well as how it worked and why it was used. And in doing that, the teens were able to speak more clearly to the issues when they went to speak to the community planning boards and their county commissioners. Again, over and over again, we heard local leaders refer to the TAP youth as problem solvers and not problems. And this is a real change from the first year when we had people saying we didn't understand why we were working with that group of kids, when there were kids out there who were already positive and could really benefit from this type of program. The teens were asked in about halfway through their first year to begin to identify a list of things that they wanted to do in their community that they felt needed to be addressed. I'll give you some examples. They felt like there was problems with litter. They thought there were problems with no places for teens to hang out without getting in trouble. They had a very long list. Some of them were very grandiose, like they wanted to build a giant skate park, which never happened, but some other things did happen that kind of replaced that, and the teens were happy with that. So they came up with these various projects. As they named the things that needed to be done, we asked them, well, how do you make this happen? We never directly gave them answers to, this is how you fix this problem. We would always come back with, well, how do you think you need to fix this problem? What skill sets do you need to have in order to address this issue in your community? So we really used, I guess you would say, the Socratic method to get the teens engaged and get them to be the problem solvers. Once they identified their key projects were they wanted to develop a mascot for their school in Madison County, which ended up being very costly. So how are you going to have it designed? How do you get it approved by the school board? Those types of things. And how do you raise the funds to actually have this school mascot created? That was one. Another one was cleaning up and improving a historic graveyard in their home county that had the grave of the founder of their community. In the other county, there was a community park that had been very special to the kids in the community, but it had been ignored and had been allowed to just kind of go back to weeds and nothing. And the kids wanted to turn it back into a place for the community where the community could come together for special events, that kids could go and play, and that it would be safe, and the adults would want to also be involved in helping to make this a better place. So those were the three big projects that they were going to work on over the years. So if you're going to be working on a park project or a historic graveyard or even the mascot project, you've got to, one, understand how do you plan to do these projects, what's the science behind the various things that you're going to be doing, what's the math behind these various things you're going to be doing, and how do you get permission to move forward to make these changes in their community. One of the things we did with the kids with the community park was to interact with the College of Environment and Design at UGA and had a design charrette where the kids invited community members, local leaders, citizens, the lady who owns the coffee shop in the town, a guy who mows the yards, has a landscape maintenance business in the community. And they invited these people. All these adults and the teens came together at UGA and went through a design charrette, which produced a new design for the park. and the kids were then able to take that design to their city council and to appeal to them to let them begin to look at raising funds and finding ways to improve the community. So they had small projects that they did week to week. They did volunteering work in the community. They became key volunteers that people called on. They had larger projects in their counties and in their neighborhoods. And then as part of the graduation process in their senior year, we had two things that they did. One, we visited various universities and colleges and technical schools and apprentice programs that the kids had identified that they were interested in around Georgia. And the second piece was to take their show on the road. And they identified, it was after Hurricane Sandy, and they identified the wetlands areas in New York and New Jersey, Jamaica Bay and Breezy Point, where they wanted to go and help. Well, that presented a lot of different problems. One is, how do you transport them, the cost of this kind of effort, and how do you make those connections in another state where you can actually go and do work that needs to be done, not just go up there and actually become more of a burden than a help. So the teens began doing their research to try to figure out what organization they would like to work with. The organization they worked with was the Littoral Society in Jamaica Bay, and also the university.
I heard somebody talking in here. I didn't know who they were talking to.
Also the Cornell University. They ended up working there to help them restore the wetlands in Jamaica Bay and along Breezy Points, and they are, even though the funding has ended, they're going to continue to do that. One of the things that the teens were asked to do was to come and brief the White House on the work that they had been doing. Our funding had come from USDA, so this was very appropriate. The teens, one of the things that happened, most of our teens did not have the clothing that would be necessary to go and present, but we had a very generous donor through Booz Allen Hamilton, who came in and provided our teens with khaki pants and neckties and scarves and white shirts and shoes, and they were able to go to the White House, their heads held high. They briefed the White House on their projects. One of the comments that came from Cal Penn, who is an advisor to the president on youth volunteering, was that, are these youth coming here to ask for funds so they can do things that they think they might want to do? And one of the teens turned to him and said, no, sir, we're coming to tell you what we have already done and what we're going to continue to do in our community. Overall, I think this statement from Shaq, the young man on the right in the upper photograph, when he was talking to other students at his school, we had an event at one of the schools, and he turned to them and asked him what he was planning on doing after he graduated from high school, and the kid said, well, I think I'll do this, I think I'll do that. Shaq turned to him and said, hey, man, and I'll get it wrong, you have to have a plan. And I think that is the ultimate thing that came out of Teens as Planners. They recognize that nothing just happens. You have to have a plan, you have to work collaboratively, and you have to pull in a lot of people with a lot of different skills, and everyone has something to bring to the table. We are going to be able to continue funding this project. Both school systems have stepped up, and Cooperative Extension with UGA is also going to be helping to continue the funding for this project in these two counties. It will not move beyond the counties, but a lot of the concepts are going to be integrated into the 4-H program and into youth development programs through Cooperative Extension. Okay, I guess I turn it over now to, does it go back to you, Christine?
Yes, it does. All right, I'm just going to take the screen.
Yes. Yes, I'm new. Okay.
All righty. So let's go ahead and start the questions and answers. Let's see, I think this first question is for Carol. The program that you were talking about, the camp, how did it all get started, and why did this, or how did it get funded, and what was the determination that it needed to get started? If you could just kind of talk about the beginning stages before it began.
Sure. Actually, as I said, it grew out of an existing partnership. I was employed by the university as an outreach person at the Environmental and Heritage Center, and so they had a lot of things that they were already working on together, and so this was just kind of an extension. So as far as funding this camp, it didn't really cost any more than any other camp at the Environmental Heritage Center. So there wasn't, we didn't have to do fundraising or anything for that. But the idea for this actually grew out of, we had been looking, the Environmental Center had been looking at actually the Boy Scout architecture badge and trying to, and saw that as a vehicle for helping to talk about architecture in general, but especially green building. But found that that was just too logistically difficult to do in a single-day program, so we started exploring the idea of the camp. And as that grew, we realized that it could be so much more than just an architecture camp, and that's when we pulled in the expertise from the university and brought in the landscape architecture component as well. I will say that funding is a challenge in the long term. They have not done this camp the last couple of years, in part because it was time to rotate out and do some other camps. They like to give camps a break so that they come back new every few years, but also in part because the university had to stop funding a full-time position at the facility, and so the Heritage Center has been able to continue running the camp. Still gets in the years that they choose to do so, but it's been a lot more challenging because the university can no longer fund the staff in order to do that. So it has now fallen to the Environmental Center to be able to supply somebody with enough expertise to coordinate and run the camp. In some years that happens, and some years it doesn't.
Great, thank you. This next question, I believe...
This is Sharon.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, this is Sharon. As the team knows, I am doing this from the hospital. Okay, and the doctor has just come in. I'm going to have to get off. If you could relay any questions to me in written form, I'd be glad to answer anyone's questions. This has been kind of a difficult week, and I apologize.
Not a problem. We will be sure to forward any of those questions to you.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I apologize for having to leave.
No problem.
Thanks, Sharon.
Okay, so, geez, what a trooper. Yeah, Sharon was a real trooper. She was a little flustered, and I think there was a little bit of background noise, but boy, she did good, didn't she? Okay, this next question, I believe, is for Grace. If I'm trying to remember, that the whole, not the whole, but part of the intent was that that these students, after they participate in the program, they go off, they go to college, they come back. Are there any types of initiatives to sort of lure them back, to sort of bring that education back into town, things like that?
Well, it's not specifically a part of this program, but ARC right now is helping to lead a regional competitiveness strategy and economic competitiveness strategy. And one of the, there are sort of 4 goals. One goal is livable communities, and so the research we've done into the millennials, and these young people are are becoming millennials, and a lot of the graduates are millennials, is they're looking for a very high quality of life. So we hope that that task force that's working on livability will be successful in expanding walkability, transit, and other things, housing options that young people are looking for. As I said, we are beginning to launch a MARC Alumni Program, which we think can be helpful in encouraging people to come back. Obviously, if people have a job here, they are perhaps more likely to come back here. I've had parents say to me, before my son or daughter went through this program, they had every intention of going to college and turning their back on Atlanta, and this program has helped them see what great potential they might have in leadership in Metro Atlanta. And right now, my son, daughter, is planning to return after college. We don't have good metrics on that, and that's something that we're going to be working on, as I say, through this alumni program to find out where all these young people are and why they came back. I'm sure the reasons are many, but that's sort of where we are. But we wherever they go, we think they'll be engaged in regional issues no matter where they live, and that'll be good for other communities if they're not here.
Great, thank you. This next question is for either Carol or Grace. Given that teens or young people in general are very good, for the most part, at communicating with social media, to what extent do any of these camps or projects engage social media like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest? Do they at all? And this is for either one of you.
I'll start, Carol, if you wish. Years ago, before Facebook became what it is today, the MARC class created a Facebook page, and successive classes are invited to be a part of that Facebook page. That's about all we've done. Now, one of the things that the classes do, as I mentioned, they work on resolutions for ideas that they think ought to be implemented in the region, and invariably the marketing and the communications and public involvement group will talk about promoting the MARC class. They want more people to know about it. They want more people to know about ARC, and they have proposed a variety of strategies using social media to communicate that. Some of them have built websites, some of them have. I don't think they've done too much with Twitter, but they have been very active with Facebook.
And just by the nature of the camp being a single week program, that public that form of public involvement was not really part of it.
Okay, let's see here. So I guess this is an overarching question for either one of you. So how do we get a program like this started? What are some of the tactics that need to be considered first off to get some kind of program like this, whether it be over a 6-month period or a condensed 1 week? Who are some of the major players that should be consulted first, and should some kind of committee of a cross section of an area be brought together first? Do you have any thoughts on how to get these folks started on a project like this?
Well, when ARC began this program, we had a nonprofit partner, the State YMCA of Georgia, which is a teen group. And they had an existing program called the Youth Assembly, which gave the students an experience like the General Assembly, and they took them down for the state General Assembly, and then they held their own General Assembly. And statewide director and our director were talking one day, and that's where the idea emerged from that conversation. So originally, the statewide, their goal was to raise the money, and ARC's work was to provide the curriculum, and statewide would recruit, and as I said, we would do the curriculum. For a variety of reasons, the statewide was not able to continue the program after the first 2 or 3 years, and so we've taken it on. I think we have partnered with agencies like Southface, which does energy efficiency and sustainability. We've partnered with PEDS. You saw the picture in the slideshow of pedestrians educating drivers on safety, and I think it is clearly you've got to have the support of your board, and the deeper you can reach into the schools, I think the better, because you have to depend upon the schools, or at least organizations that deal with youth, to do your recruiting. That was initially, statewide was very, very helpful, because they would have Y Club members in the schools, and participation in those schools was very strong. And we struggled a little bit after they had to give up the program in kind of finding our footing. But we do as much outreach as we can to the schools to promote the program to them, and we encourage our board, and they've been very supportive, to talk about it in the community.
All right, wonderful. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think, for the camp being a very different situation, we went about it from a very different angle. We already had the benefit of the existing partnership, but if not, and you were thinking about beginning something like this as a practicing professional, the first step would be just to identify those places in your community that are working with the topics or age group that you're thinking about, and build that partnership first, like figure out how you can fit into their program. And then really for us, the biggest challenge in making sure that we were able to go ahead with the camp was, identifying all of those outside professionals we wanted to bring in, identifying all the field trip sites, and for example, we had to find we wanted to visit a construction site in progress, so we had to find something in construction that would let 13 middle school students come trek around their property, that sort of thing. So figuring out all those things that involve external forces first, and then if you can get all of those to fall into place and get all of your guest speakers scheduled, then you can have the camp. And so those are, I guess, the two biggest challenges to getting started for us.
Wonderful, thank you. Well, believe it or not, I can't believe it, it's already 2:30. This was really great. For those who had questions for Sharon, we will forward those to her, and for any questions that we didn't get a chance to answer, they will be forwarded to all of our speakers. So I'd like to thank Ramona and the Private Practice Division for hosting this session today, and for Grace, Carol, and Sharon for sharing their experience with youth engagement, and for for all of our divisions and chapters that promote our Planning Webcast Consortium. Thank you. So everyone have a great weekend, and don't forget to check out our website or our Facebook page. All of the September sessions are up and listed. Everyone have a great weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Christine. Thanks.